Setting rates for your wedding hair and makeup business can be a frustrating and complicated process if you're new. And even if you've been doing it for a while, sometimes you can end up either second guessing yourself or wondering if you're leaving money on the table. Well, let me help you make the process a little bit easier. Today on the Swears and Does Hair podcast, it's me, your host, Sue Minsky, business coach for bridal hairstylists and makeup artists, helping you to make navigating setting your travel prices a little bit easier. Today, we're going to be talking about that more often overlooked piece of the pricing puzzle, travel costs. What should you charge? When should you charge? Where should you charge for? It comes up over and over again in wedding chats, and I wrote a blog article about this several years ago, but because I see so many people having this conversation online, trying to source information on who charges and what, I thought it would be a really great topic to bring to the podcast and the YouTube channel, because I want to help to get this information into as many hands as possible and to help empower bridal hairstylists and makeup artists setting their travel rates. So let's go ahead and dive in. My best piece of advice, is going to be don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to charge different things until you find the sweet spot for your business. Don't just go online and start asking, well, what does everybody charge? How do they charge it? Because their business is going to be completely different from yours. And even if you are looking at somebody local to you, you don't necessarily know what goes into how they set their rates, whether they set them correctly, if they're profitable or just breaking even, et cetera, et cetera. So doesn't matter what other people charge really for anything within their business. It all comes down to you and your business. And sometimes it's going to take a little bit of trial and error, but eventually your business is going to be better for it and you're going to find that sweet spot. And remember, your business is always going to be evolving as well. And as things change in your business, you're going to need to make tweaks to how you do things and how you set your prices. Nothing is set in stone, so learn to be flexible, relax, and the process of setting your rates and your prices for travel and things like that is going to become infinitely less stressful. The best part of running your own business is that it is you and you alone that gets to decide what is or isn't working for your business and then change it as you see fit. So if you start out using a mileage-based system and find out that you'd rather be using a time-based system or flat rates, switch it up. Now, keep in mind the quotes that you've sent out should have an expiration date, and brides that are under contract already have their rates locked in. Anybody who has a contract signed or who has a quote and you turn around and you change it, they are locked in at that if they have a contract, and they're temporarily locked in until their quote expires. But everybody else inquiring after you make a change, whether you've announced it online, whether you put it on your website, whatever, none of that really matters. When you make a change in your business, everybody who inquires moving forward should be getting those rates. So if it's a Monday and you send out a bunch of quotes and on Tuesday you up your travel fees because you've been listening to this podcast on Monday afternoon and you're like, oh, maybe I should do that. Tuesday morning, you want to make that change and implement it, and a bride inquires on Tuesday afternoon, guess what? She's going to get that new rate. You do not have to wait until the first of the year or some magic date in the future that all of these things go into effect. If you've made that change in your business, now this goes with whatever policy you have, not just with your travel rates or rates in general. If you've made that change in your business, from the second that you made that change, everything after now follows that policy, okay? Anybody who has not signed a contract and agreed to rates and policies and all of those kinds of things is subject to going forward with these new rates in mind, okay? So before we get to the good stuff, I have a little pre-episode announcement, kind of not pre, but like still in the beginning of the episode. It is Cyber Monday today. Okay, not obviously the exact day today because these are filmed and edited and everything in person, but when you are going to be listening to it, it's Cyber Monday. And I wanted to take a second to just remind you that I have my once a year sale going on right now on my coaching resources and courses and things like that. And I have my Cyber Monday deal going out. It ends tonight at midnight. So if you are listening, this is your quick reminder to go ahead and check my Instagram stories when you're done listening to this episode or when you're done watching this YouTube video. Go and check my Instagram stories for the links or check your email if you're on my email list. This deal does expire at midnight tonight. If you're watching this or listening to it after Cyber Monday, just keep in mind that all of the coaching and all of the resources that I have are open year round. If there is something that you're interested in and it's no longer on sale, so to speak, then that's okay. You can still get your hands on that information and use it to transform the way you do your business so that moving forward in 2024 and beyond, you can have a more sustainable, healthier, profitable business, and you can have more enjoyment, better quality brides, and have much more clarity on how to run the business side of everything. I don't close out things, even though I have like launches where things are open for certain dates. Those are just promotional things where you get bonuses for signing up for courses during different periods of the year. Right now we have my year sale. Once a year, I actually discount stuff. Only time of the year where you'll see me give any kind of a discount. But if it's afterwards, you can always go ahead and you can sign up for any of my resources, whether that's one-on-one coaching, my courses, or download any of my templates or masterclass bundles, things like that. You can get those at any point because I do not want to gatekeep. I do not want to hold you back from having the best business possible. Let's get back into setting your travel rates. Now, this is going to be specifically for travel within your local area. I have a whole separate blog article and set of information when you're talking about destination weddings. So if you are traveling more than 2 hours or so, now it's going to change for everybody. Some people it's 90 minutes. Some people a destination for them will be more than 3 hours. So for you, if it's traveling more than however much that threshold is, then that's going to be more on the destination side of things. So I will put a link to those kind of resources in the description for this video or this podcast episode that you're listening to. And you can go find out more about that. I'm talking about like the day-to-day travel rates, driving to and from the wedding, and you don't have to stay overnight anywhere. Okay, so there's 3 different methods that I kind of have things broken down into. There's going to be mileage based, there's going to be time based, and then there's going to be a flat rate. So you can set your base off of mileage. So the distance between her location and where you live. You can set it based off of time. So a set rate per hour that it takes you to get to her location from yours. Or you can simply set a flat fee per area. And you can block this out however makes the most sense for you. As an example, I live in Northern Virginia. Driving into DC, depending on the day of the week and what time it is and whether or not there's a protest or a parade or a marathon being run there, it can take me anywhere from 35 minutes to 2 hours to get into certain parts of DC. I'm not a time traveler. I can't go back in time and be like, oh, that actually took me 2 hours. I should have set my rate for that instead. I can't tell the future and know in advance, oh, well, this is what's going to be happening on that day and it's going to only take me 30 minutes or whatever. I never know what it's going to be like. So I used to start out with mileage based. It was, 30 miles into DC. And so it would be based on my mileage rate. And then I realized some days it does take me 2 hours to get to my location. Or even if I got there really early in the morning on the way home, now everybody is in DC on a Saturday. Now it's going to take me those 2 hours to get back home. It was always so in flux that I thought, okay, well, a flat mileage rate will be good. But then I thought about, well, now I'm spending all of this time in the car and dealing with all of this traffic and all of these navigational challenges and stuff like that. I don't feel compensated fairly any longer for that based on the mileage. Driving 30 miles in the different direction out towards West Virginia, or driving down, southwest or southeast or just straight south in Virginia. 30 miles in any other direction can be a completely different thing, and it could only take me 35, 40 minutes. So I decided that moving forward, anything in DC itself was going to be a flat rate. And that covered the variability of what going into the city looked like for me. Some days I was going to be lucky and it wasn't going to be as big of a hassle. Some days it was going to be a big hassle and a big pain in the ass. But either way, I thought about it and I thought, even on my worst days, what feels like a fair compensation for my time that also covers how much it's going to cost for me for gas, the wear and tear, the mileage that I've put onto my vehicle, all of those kinds of things. What feels fair to me? And I set that as my rate. So anything inside of DC, rather than making it complicated and people having to figure out, well, how far away is her studio from my address, or how long does that take? I made it easy. It's one flat rate. So anybody inquiring for me for DC, they know exactly what their travel fee is going to be. Anybody who I'm not traveling into the city and it's pretty standard travel, they get the mileage-based rate. So you can do a combination too. So you don't have to just be like, well, everybody is mileage, everybody is based on time, or everybody is flat rates. You can say this particular area, because it's more tricky, is just going to be a flat rate to make my life and everybody else's life easier. There we go. If you are somebody who is traveling to and from a city, this is the way that I think makes the most sense. It just makes it so much easier for you and for your clients. But you might want to say anything up to the city limits or within the city limits, whatever. So if you're going to do like a flat rate, however it makes the most sense to you, what is that area? Is it a specific mileage? Is it a specific zip code? Et cetera, et cetera. If you're inside of DC, it could be, anywhere along the blue line or the orange line or whatever. You can decide how you're going to break up these different areas to charge those rates and whatever makes sense for you. So you can see how asking people, well, how do you do it? Doesn't really matter, because you don't live where they live, and how you travel to and from your clients is going to be different. So you need to make these processes and set these rates based on what makes the most sense for you, and to you also what feels fair to you. Me, personally, I don't mind driving. I love driving. I pop on a podcast like what I'm, hoping you're listening to maybe on a wedding morning to or from somewhere. And I like to learn something while I'm driving. I find it's a really great opportunity for me to kind of zone out and listen and feed my brain at that time. Some people are like, no, I just want to turn on music and I want to zone out. Or some people are like, I just need silence. I've definitely had those weddings where I've gotten in the car afterwards and I'm like, silence. I just want silence. I've had too much noise and too much stimulation inside the room for the last 6 hours. My nervous system is feeling like really going a little bit crazy. I just want to get behind the wheel and drive home in silence. I'm going to stop at a Chick-fil-A and I'm going to have my Dr. Pepper and my little chicken nuggies, and I'm going to have my peace. Everybody's going to feel differently about driving, but for myself, I don't mind driving. I like going long distances. I've been driving in the car, my whole life, ever since I was like 10 months old. My grandparents lived in Florida. We lived up in Connecticut. They would drive 2 days up the East Coast, pick up me and my mother, and drive us 2 days back down to Florida. So literally my entire life, I've been driving all up and down the East Coast. It doesn't matter to me. You might feel completely different where you're like, oh, I hate driving. I do not like driving. I don't want to take a wedding that is an hour away. To me, that just feels icky. I don't like having to get up that early in the morning or whatever. So you may want to put a premium on your drive time. If it's far away, you're like, ugh, I don't like this. You're going to really have to pay me to make it worth it to me. Go ahead and do that. That is the beauty and the freedom of being your own boss. You get to decide what is worth your time and how much your time is worth. So let's break down a little bit more between these three different types. So let's start off with mileage. Now, the biggest mistake that I see people when they set rates based on mileage is going off the current tax deduction rate. As an example, so like 2020, back when I wrote this article, the IRS tax deduction rate in the United States, 57.5 cents per mile. In 2019, it had been 62.5 cents per mile. It actually went down 5 cents a mile from 2019 until 2020. I mean, really, what the fuck, IRS? Why are things going down? Okay, but can you see how going off that rate could seriously impact your profitability? If you are just going based on what the current tax deduction rate is, that could go down. And if you are setting rates for 6 months in advance, or weddings a year in advance, or 18 months in advance, and now your tax deduction rate is going down, like, you're really screwing with yourself. So also, what else is wrong with the IRS deduction rate? It doesn't take into account any wear and tear on your car. And the IRS rate isn't the only thing that fluctuates. Gas prices do. So if you book a wedding in 2023, because that's when we're doing this video right now, for a 2024 wedding, and you're just going off that current tax rate, that's pennies. Like literally, it's a cents. Okay. It's not even, there's not even dollar signs attached to that rate. Okay. So that is not enough. If you're doing, if it's, I don't know what it is for 2023, but let's say it got back up to 62.5 cents. I'm hoping if I were to do my research before this video today, I would have known that, but I'm hoping that it's at least 62.5 cents per mile now. That's not even a dollar. Gas prices, at this point where I am in Virginia, is about $3.50 a gallon or so. Some of it's a little bit cheaper, some of it's a little bit higher. And tomorrow I could wake up and it could be like $3.85, depending on your vehicle and what you drive. You might get way better gas mileage than I do. I drive a minivan. I get shit mileage. Okay. I could have a big SUV, or I could have a electric car, or, a hybrid vehicle. Gas prices are going to fluctuate, and your mileage and your fuel efficiency is going to be different for every vehicle that you have. If I am basing it off of that IRS rate, that's not enough to cover my gas. In today's economy, not nearly enough to cover my gas. So now I would be paying to go to work. It doesn't take into account if that in a year from now, when that wedding happens, gas is up over $4. Now I'm paying even more to go to work. And no, you can't retroactively go back and be like, I need to charge more for travel because gas is suddenly so much more. I remember when that happened last year and gas was up over like $7 or $8 in certain parts of the country. And everybody in the wedding industry was freaking the fuck out because they were like, oh my God, it's so much more expensive for gas right now. And I set my travel rates a year and a half ago. Or they were still in the situation where they'd had weddings from the pandemic that had gotten pushed back into 2022. And here they had these rates from essentially what was 2019 for originally a 2020 date. They got postponed. It was now happening in 2022. That's 3 years worth of normal gas rates raising. And now they had this huge spike after, what was happening over in Russia and their invasions and this and that, all these things. And it was like suddenly huge gas spikes. And everybody was like, oh my God, it's costing me so much to go to people. So if you're just going off the bare minimum, that IRS tax rate, you're already potentially really fucking yourself over. even with normal gas price fluctuations. But God forbid we have something else that happens in this world and gas prices spike again. That's what you're going to be dealing with. So definitely take into account how all of these different factors play into one another. And besides, even just that 62 cents a mile, that's just really, really low. That's one's not even covering your gas. Is it enough to even get an oil change? What about tire rotations? What about getting new tires? Things on your car break down. I know we own our cars and we have to drive anyways, and it's a part of the cost of owning a vehicle and running a business. But your business, if you're using your vehicle for business purposes, the business should be covering those expenses. And if it's not, then you need to make sure that you are charging more for it. We're going to learn to level up our business, and we're going to start with our travel prices for 2024 weddings, guys, okay? When you set your rates based on mileage, make sure that it's high enough to not only account for keeping your car cared for and gas prices, but the other factor is the time that it takes you get there. You should never be working for free, okay? That's why we have travel fees to begin with. We should be getting paid for the time we spend driving to our brides. All minutes should be accounted for in your pricing, even driving. And then also, what is the other factor that really comes into when a bride asks, well, why is there a travel fee? It's not just for gas. It's not just for the wear and tear on our car. And it's not just for the time that it takes us to drive there. We are taking our business to them. That means that we are packing up all of our products and we are spending all of that time packing, going there, setting up, packing it all back in again, putting it into our vehicle, coming home, and then setting it back up into our studio location for those brides. All of those minutes need to be accounted for as well. So hopefully I've opened up your eyes and made you realize why that tax deduction rate is really just a really, really shitty starting place. We really should be going way, way more than that because it has to account for all of these things. Now, the other thing might be, okay, well, if I'm charging based on mileage, is that going to be one way or round trip? That's something that you're going to have to answer for yourself, but a question that's going to come often with brides. They're going to be like, well, is that travel fee one way or round trip? So make sure that you've got an answer for them. And better yet, include that in your welcome packet or your frequently asked questions page on your website to avoid having to type it out for them over and over and over again in your emails. If you haven't found my golden emails template bundle, this is a great resource for you. You can purchase it and download it today. Start copying, pasting. It has that kind of stuff in there. It has a template that you can create on Canva for your welcome packet, and it's going to break all that information down there for you as well. And there's a really pretty page dedicated to how you break down your travel fees. So it's super easy for your brides to understand. The other thing that I want to bring up when it comes to one way or round trip, personally, I recommend it always being round trip unless when you're setting that, you already double it at the outset. So for example, instead of it being, say, $1 a mile round trip, so $1 a mile there and then $1 a mile on the way back. If you just double it and say it's $2 from there to the venue, and then you just make that one way, you're already accounting for the time, the mileage, the gas, everything on the return trip, but you're not phrasing it to your bride that way. So if you're like, well, I don't want to make it round trip because then it makes it seem so high or whatever. I mean, logically, brides should understand if they have to pay for you to get there, they got to pay for you to get home. You don't just teleport. You still have to pay for gas and all of the reasons why they had to pay for you to come to them. They got to pay for you to get back. But you can just double it and just put it out there and just be like, no, here's just how my mileage works. It's all there. You figure out, you Google in, here's the venue, here's my starting address. It's this many miles times whatever. Boom, and then they don't have to double it again on top of that. It can be a little bit more palatable, so to speak, less sticker shock for them, but it's still going to account for the return trip as well. Or you could just start with the lower number, but just say that it's round trip. However, it's going to make more sense for how you want to explain it to brides. You can try it one way and then explain it the other way. So you could start out being like, well, I'm just going to include it and it's just going to be one way, the price is doubled. And then if you have people who have like sticker shock and it sounds too much and you have some pushback on it, try just breaking it up. Cut the price per way in half, but just let them know that it's round trip. Sometimes the way you phrase the price is going to still be the same, but the way you phrase it to your clients just makes it a little bit easier. How many times, obviously before like Amazon Prime and shipping was free, did it say, okay, if you spend X number of dollars, the shipping is free? And so we're willing to spend more money to get free shipping, but we end up spending more than what we would have in the first place. It's like one of those little like psychological things, like, yes, we'll spend an extra $20 to save $5 on shipping. Or, sometimes ending things in 0.97 or 0.99. $4.99 or $4.97 looks cheaper than $5. The difference is a penny or 3 pennies. But to our brains, we're seeing that number start with a 4, so it feels smaller. So sometimes just changing the way you present your prices can help to relieve a little bit of confusion with our clients or pushback and just make things flow a little bit easier. So don't be afraid to play around with how you present your numbers. That doesn't mean that you have to discount. It could still end up being the same total, but sometimes seeing things broken up into smaller chunks makes it easier for our audience. Sometimes people are like, no, I put things into a package, and then seeing the whole total there at the end, they don't feel nickel and dimed. Your audience, you know them best. You should be setting your prices and displaying your prices in a way that feels most in alignment with your clients. If you're not sure about that, I have a whole entire course called Unique as Fuck. It helps you to really do a deep dive into your unique audience, your target market, your dream brides, to understand how to present information to them in the best way possible so that everything feels in alignment. I'll put a link to that below, and it's always included on my website. You can go ahead and you can find it, or you can just go to beautybusinesscollective.co/uniqueaf, and you can go to the sales page and learn a little bit more about the course that way too. Really understanding your audience, really understanding your clientele is the first step to understanding how making these pricing choices is going to hinder or help push forward your business processes, okay? The next type is time-based rates. Now, like me, where I live, there's a lot of traffic. And if you live in an area with high traffic, going just a few miles can take longer than if you're in a more suburban or country setting. In that situation, time-based rates might be more appropriate for you. Traffic in DC, like I mentioned, is, like bullshit at best. The city was designed before cars were a thing. So getting from point A to point B, it can be obnoxiously long if you need to drive. But it makes it a handy reference for this example because it's already been divided into quadrants. So you have like northeast, northwest, southeast, and southwest. And a lot of these streets already have that right at the end. It'll be 34th Street Northeast or whatever. And they're like, boom, it's in the northeast quadrant. So you can say, how long does it take to get to this quadrant, this area, and know your averages and be like, okay, well, it takes me about 30 minutes to get to anywhere in this quadrant. And so you could set your rate as $50 for every 30 minutes. So anything in Northeast DC averages about 30 minutes. So it's going to be a $50 travel rate. So just kind of, base it on that. Or if you live in a situation where you're like, okay, I know I have to take highways for this, and it usually takes me about an hour to get from where I live into the city. All right. You might say, all right, I know I'm always going to be traveling at least that hour. I want to make sure that my time is compensated for. So I'm going to charge $100 an hour. So it's really up to you how you want to do it, whether if it's a city setting and you want to break it up into quadrants, or if the city is broken up into different zip codes, you can use that and just be like, anything in this zip code is this amount. It's kind of like flat rate pricing, but it's based on time. You'd use time as the factor to set that rate. So it's kind of similar. And then if you have to go in a different direction outside of the city, you can just Google and just be like, hey, how long is the average time to get to this place? Time-based, I would recommend most for if you are continually going to the same locations over and over and over again, you have a good baseline for how long it takes for you to get there. If you are new to an area and you don't know how long it takes to get to things, Google can really only help you so much. You're going to need to kind of like Google at different times of the day and figure it out, because a wedding that you have to be there at 6 a.m., like if I have to be in DC before 6 a.m., it's probably only going to take me 30 minutes to get there. If I have to be there anytime on a weekday before 10 a.m., it's going to take me almost 2 hours. On a weekend, anytime after 7 or 8 a.m., it could take me over an hour. So different times of the day going to or from a city, way that traffic is flowing, and whether it's a weekday, like a Friday wedding versus a Saturday wedding, city people are commuting to and from. That's one of the reasons why like time-based really doesn't work for me going to and from DC. So if you're going to be doing time-based, really keep that in mind. What about a Friday wedding versus a Saturday wedding? Is there certain times of day when the traffic tends to be worse? So if you're new to an area, I don't recommend time-based. If you go to the same venues over and over and over again, it might be better for you to just be like, look, I know how long it takes me to get there. I'm just going to set time-based rates and go from there and make it easier on yourself. Go ahead. Just keep in mind, brides don't know that information. So when they're searching for you and they're seeing a time-based rate, it's travel is $50 an hour. They can kind of like Google, but if a bride was going to be Googling me and she'd be like, oh, well, she's only 30 miles outside of DC. And that should be, like 35 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever. She might think that it's only going to take me 30 or 45 minutes. And that's what I'm going to base my time rate on. Where I know that it's more like an average of an hour to 2 hours. And my time-based rate is going to be set on that. So when I give her the quote, she's going to be like, wait a second, why are you charging me 2 to 3 times as much as what I expected? I Googled it and it said it's only going to take this much. Then it feels like you're being sneaky and you're trying to get something more out of her or whatnot. So I recommend really being upfront with the time-based rate and say, hey, I travel to and from this venue all the time, and just kind of list it as venues maybe instead, because that is a situation that can kind of come up. Now, the third type is flat rates. Like I said, they're kind of really similar to time-based rates, but they encompass a larger coverage area. You can set different towns to be different flat rates. DC is a flat rate. And then if I go north of DC into Maryland, anything below south of Baltimore, from the DC line all the way up to Baltimore and across, that's another rate. If I have to go north of Baltimore, that's another flat rate. Okay, so you can break it down that way. And then I could have it where it's like, okay, all of the towns surrounding me are this rate. And then I have another radius, all the towns around there is this rate. And that way people don't have to figure out, okay, well, is it 35 miles or 37 miles? And they're not really having to do much math. They just kind of either look at the name of the town or the zip code and boom, there you go. It's really easy to put together a chart and just list out those zip codes or just list out all of those towns and what the flat fees are. And you can include that when you send it to them. And that way they can just scan down the list and be like, perfect. This is how much it's going to be. It's super easy. It's super straightforward. Now, using a combination is what I have found kind of works best when you live, like I said, I know I've mentioned it a million times. You know where I live now, about 30 miles outside of DC. But using that combination when you live close to a large metropolitan area, because it accounts for when you're traveling to the city and for when you're traveling somewhere else, not in the city, or if you live right close to a state line. So if, say, you are at the corner of like Delaware, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, or whatever. I think the three of them all come really close together up there. You could have, rates for those different states kind of thing and be like, you live in Maryland, so Maryland location uses mileage, but anything in Pennsylvania is a flat rate or is based on time, or anything in Delaware, et cetera, et cetera. That is base rates, but there's another little thing that I want to kind of bring up to kind of take into consideration, and that's parking, tolls, and valet. These costs are going to vary by location, but you should still have a way to incorporate them into your pricing in a way that's easy for your brides to understand and easy for you to quote them quickly. Parking. Okay, the simplest way that I recommend having you doing this is have parking charges billed directly to the bride at her hotel. It makes it so much easier, especially if you are collecting all of your payment in advance, which is what I recommend. Please don't be trying to collect payment on a day of. You're adding so much unnecessary hassle and stress to you, to your bride, to the bridal party. You may think that it helps you with tipping. Go back a couple of episodes and listen to the first episode from season 1 for my thoughts on tipping, first of all. You think you're getting better tips that way, and just don't. Just make it super easy for yourself, because then you're going to have to keep a running log of how much it all was, and then just trust me, so much easier. Have any parking billed directly to the bride at her hotel. Now keep in mind, a lot of times the hotel is going to comp the bride's vendors or give her a discounted rate. So she ends up saving money all around. You don't have to even deal with it. If parking is not associated with the venue, such as street parking for non-hotel locations, find out what the costs are beforehand per hour. Okay, it's going to be displayed in that area. It should be easily Googleable. A lot of different cities have different payment apps now. You don't even go and feed a meter anymore. Everything is done through an app, or in the parking lots of places, there is a machine there where you pay by credit card or whatever. So you should be able to easily find out what those rates are, add that into the travel fee during your quote. If you're frequently working in a place that has paid street parking, you should know how much the hourly cost is, and you can easily calculate that at booking based on your timeline. List this charge on your pricing information as additional fees with a little asterisk, and let them know that it is based on timeline requirements. So if it is $20 per hour or whatever, and they add more time, then that is also going to add more to their travel fee. So that way they're not freaking out later on where they're like, oh, I added more services. Why are you adding more for travel? You can let them know, hey, I have to be there longer. That means that the travel is going to be more expensive because I had to park for longer. Brides who are having you get them ready somewhere that has street parking, they are aware that it's not free. And as long as you let them know what those parking fees are going to be up front, there's no surprise, and it should be just fine. Asking for parking fees after the fact means you have to chase them down afterwards, and that's just a hassle. After the wedding day, after hair and makeup services have been completed and you've left the location, trying to get pricing from brides is a hassle. There's a whole bunch of legal obligations for keeping credit cards on file, and again, you're just adding more unnecessary steps. Just figure out what it's going to be beforehand. Go a little bit higher if you are worried about getting underpaid for it. Add it on and just make your life so much easier. If the hotel has valet, use it. Okay, it's so much faster than self-parking or street parking, and it will automatically be billed to the bride's room. So again, super, super easy. I just put this as a part inside of my contract under parking, letting them know that if there is valet at the hotel, I will use valet and I will have it charged to the bride's room. When I pull up, I let them know I am here for such and such person's wedding, room blah, blah, blah. They write it down on the little ticket, and I let them know I will be here for approximately 5 or 6 hours. So they know what section of the garage to park my vehicle in so that they can come and they can get it out faster for me. They're not expecting me to be there overnight or there for a couple of days or whatever. They know I'm there to do a wedding. I'm only going to be there for a few hours. It's easier to find my car afterwards. And then I've already told them the bride's room. I just come in at the end and just be like, hey, here's my ticket. They bring me my card. I give them their little tip and I go on my way. If you work in an area that has tolls, I suggest using a flat rate structure that takes that into account. Okay, so it's not just your flat travel area. If you know you need to get on the New Jersey Turnpike and you need to go for so many exits or whatever, it's pretty straightforward. You know what that is going to be. Add that in. You don't need to necessarily itemize that. You can just put on your website, when you break down and you say, okay, this is what my travel rates are when people are researching you, plus any applicable tolls. Okay. So when they're like, oh, I thought it should be $50. Why are you saying $65? You can just remind them, just be like, yeah, because I know it's going to be about $15 worth of tolls, but you don't necessarily have to write tolls in there on your quote or whatever. Your proposal, however, whatever you want to call it. You don't have to necessarily break that down. Just put it into that flat travel rate. If she questions it, you just remind her, yeah, it includes tolls. That was listed on your quote or on my website, my pricing, my welcome packet, whatever. If there is a toll included, it will be added on. One last thing about quotes is make sure that you're listing travel as a single line item. You don't need to break it all down. You don't need to be like, this is how much for, the travel, and then this is how much for tolls, and then this is how much for parking. Just put it all together in one total. This is what it's going to cost, all inclusively, for her to travel to you. Same thing if you listen to me on like destination weddings, or if you go ahead and you read that blog, or if you join Masterclass Magic and you watch the masterclass that I do about creating a business as a destination artist. We do not itemize. This is not like you are submitting to, the accounting department for reimbursement for a work trip. It does not need to be itemized to your bride. Things will be itemized when you go ahead and you send that to your accountant to pay for taxes, because it's going to be categorized different ways and stuff. But at the end of the day, the bride just needs to know the total. How much does this cost for her to have you come to her? That's all that really matters. She doesn't necessarily need to know, or does she really care about all of those little line items? The more line items you give her, the more ammunition you give a picky bride to try and pick that apart and just be like, okay, well, I don't like that you are charging me for the tolls, or I don't like that you're charging me for the parking or for whatever. Don't even give that to them. Don't give them that kind of ammunition. First of all, that's a huge red flag, and it means that your marketing needs to be upgraded to reach a higher quality bride, because you're reaching a really low quality bride if that's what they're nitpicking about. But in general, one line item, that's all they need. They don't need to be confused by all these things. They don't need to feel like you're nickel and diming them. Just give it to her straight. This is how much it's going to cost. So thank you so much for listening to today's episode or watching it on the YouTube channel. I hope it has been helpful for you. If this is something that you already do in your business and you feel really good about it, I hope I've at least inspired you to consider looking at different aspects of it and making sure that you have everything that you need included. If you are an artist who has been confused about this, I really hope that I have helped to clarify everything for you. If you're listening to it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, go ahead and share it to your Instagram stories and let me know what was the most helpful piece of information in today's episode. I always love reading people's comments or reading their DMs or reviews and things like that, and finding out what little piece inside of the episode helped to spark something in them. And it lets me know, one, that I'm doing a good job, because no matter how many times I go through and create these podcasts or my trainings or my master classes and my courses and all these things, there's always that one little piece of my mind that's always wondering, is this actually going to be helpful to people? So knowing, yes, this was helpful and this is what part was helpful or why it was helpful, helps one, make me feel a little bit better and inspires me to continue in this journey with educating and helping you grow your business. But also it helps to give me an idea of what type of information to create future topics and future trainings about. What is helpful to you? What can I expand upon in that area to make your life even better and even easier? So go ahead, share it to your Instagram stories, or if you're watching on the YouTube channel, comment down below and let me know what piece of information really stood out to you or you found the most helpful. It helps to really inspire future topics and trainings. And last but not least, if you have a moment, I would love if you could leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you are listening to this episode today. I am trying to get 50 different reviews, one from each state in the United States by June of 2024. So I would love if you can help me on that mission. Leave me a quick review. Doesn't have to be too complex. Just give it, 5 stars, and just write in the comments tuning in from Pennsylvania, Arizona, Illinois, wherever you're tuning in and listening. I would love if you could just leave me a quick review and let me know. I have a fun little project that I'm doing behind the scenes to put all of these together to help me kind of reach that goal. So if you got a second, please go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I will see you back next week. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, for sharing, and helping to support my dream of empowering the bridal hair and makeup industry. I will see you back next time.